Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So this one is going to be quick. At least I think it is. I was about to say my professor. And at one point he was my professor. It was absolutely the weirdest thing in the world. The team lead at my particular company's chief technology officer. I actually went to school with him. He used to be my professor. He used to be, in fact, my favorite professor. Like, in technology, I used to have this saying, WWKD, what would person names do? And having him as a person who's, as a chief technology officer is bizarre, to say the least. Because this is a detour. It's my show. I can do whatever I want. It's one thing if you're in a situation where you fail. Well, fair enough. Nobody likes to fail. But if you don't get something done, if you can't get something done, if you struggle with something, whatever, just as a human being, if for whatever reason you fail. If it's people who you don't necessarily know, and yes, you may go to work with them and everything else, but that's a formal relationship. Fair enough. I failed. It's what it is. Not the best thing in the world. I don't necessarily like to do it. I try to keep it to a minimum, but whatever. You failed. When it's somebody who you actually like and respect, and to some degree would prefer to not see you as a fuck up. Oh man, like there's an extra serving of pressure that's applied to a person when they're doing stuff. It's the most bizarre thing in the world. I can count on one hand the number of people where I have some level of admiration for, and he's one of them. And so it's this, don't fuck up. It's just weird. It's weird. There were several people who came on to our company that I taught them in regards to software. Literally taught. Some was mentoring, some was teaching. And so it's like having this turn of the worm is strange. Is what it is. That's not what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about is a conversation that him and I had. He's a libertarian. And look, man, he's the weirdest libertarian. As we were talking, I was like, you're sounding a little bit of a socialist. No. But I did wish Bernie Sanders would have won the primaries. That was awesome. Yeah, he didn't like Trump. He's a libertarian. He didn't like Trump. But him and I were kind of making this point, and we ended up on one very clear thing that we agreed on. In fact, like 50% of the stuff we say we agree on. But on this one clear point that I don't want to talk about, and I've talked about before. The two parties don't represent your interests. They don't. I'm sorry. They don't. I know you may have certain beliefs that these guys do. They don't. They take a huge amount of cash and they lean towards the people who are giving them the cash. Now, I want to make this point in two ways. You have a Republican Party during the time of the Democrats, during the time Obama was in office. And the debt ceiling came up, and they bitched and moaned and complained. Oh, we can't pass the debt ceiling. We can't raise it 1 red cent. Even going so far as to say, we're going to go over the cliff. We're going to go over the cliff. Buckle up. We're going to go over that cliff. They make it sound like this kind of wrestler thing. Make it sound cool, everything else. And you have all these other righties like, yes, let's go over the cliff. Let's go over the cliff. You have the rest of the world saying, what the fuck are they doing? What is wrong with those people? What are they doing? Eventually, they raised it, but that's after months. Now, they did this because they wanted to tie down the hands of Obama to something in domestic so he couldn't do anything else, meaning you are not going to be able to get your domestic policy passed, so we're going to tie your hands down into this. This is what our politics has become to. Let's stab the country in order to get across political points. Now, the point I'm getting at here, though, is the moment that Trump took office, they raised that debt ceiling that couldn't be moved 1 inch. That couldn't be budged by 1 penny or the world would collapse. We can't do it. We need to tighten our belts. They raised it by $9 trillion. Think about that. The Republican Party bitched and moaned, the party of fiscal sanity. We're the adults in the room. Those guys, the daddies, the people who were the hard asses, the people who didn't want to spend any money, who didn't even want to spend any money in regards to paying the bills that we had already incurred. Those guys. Couldn't raise it 1 red cent. Raised it $9 trillion when Trump took office. Well, that's interesting. So which is it? Yes, we're the party of fiscal sanity, But we didn't have a choice but raising the $9 trillion. I'm saying, I said that poorly, I'm sorry. If you're being honest, just as a person, if you're being honest, and you look at that scenario, and you say to yourself, well, wait a minute. They said they couldn't raise it 1%, but they raised it $9 trillion when Trump took office. This doesn't make sense to me. Why are they raising it $9 trillion when they said they couldn't do it when Obama was in office? Honesty should kick in and say, okay, that they were lying. That's what honesty will kick in and say. Honesty will say that even though Republicans scream and bitch and moan about the budget, they still increase the budget. In fact, the budget balloons under Republican presidents. Balloons. It balloons. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. Look it up. The party of fiscal sanity. Now, the point that I'm getting at is Republicans use the budget as just a talking point. That's it. They try to find justifications to essentially have tax cuts. The justification they find to have those tax cuts usually come in, we're going to give tax cuts, or we're going to, tighten our belts. We're going to tighten our belts. Now, the tax cuts that they're talking about aren't for you. They aren't for you. The proclamations of freedom that they like to talk about is not for you. The overwhelming majority of the tax cuts go to essentially the upper crust. Donald Trump right now is passing a budget that's going to give $1 trillion to people who need it the least. That's what they do when they get in office. It's not a shock. I would imagine at this point, if somebody's being honest, they can look at that and they can identify it, particularly when they see the trend going throughout history. Don't take my word for it. Just look it up. It's true. It's factually true. It's a flat fact. It's a flat fact. Now, it wasn't always that way. At one point, Republicans were the party of fiscal sanity in a sense, if you want to call it that. Eisenhower comes out saying, I think it's better that we pay down the budget than we do to, all the tax cuts and whatever. So income tax rate, 70, 90%. That was a Republican president. That's when they actually meant it. Now, Eisenhower also was the guy who said, if you're not on board with the social safety net, essentially get the fuck out the country. Republican. What I'm getting at is that at one point, this wasn't just spectacle. This wasn't just political gamesmanship. You did have Republicans that actually believed it. And if they believed it, taking measures such as, I am raising taxes to deal with the thing that they say they believe in. My point is, it's spectacle now. It's not reality. They're taking huge amounts of money. They're calling for the tax cuts because they want to give tax cuts to the people who essentially are giving them the large amounts of cash. It's business investment. Now, this is proclamation without any necessarily reality behind what they say. They may say things about the middle class and everything else, but ultimately what they care about is we need tax cuts. We're going to get paid. We're going to give tax cuts. This idea of lowering the budget and everything else, this is more to do with we're going to attack the Democrats in order to stop them from doing these programs because we're going to say that the budget is out of whack, they're spending too much money, etc., etc. But again, they're not the party of fiscal sanity. Look it up. Look it up. It's just what they say. It is not what they do. The same thing is true for Democrats. Now, at one point, Democrats was the party of we're going to deal with the poor, we're going to deal with the middle class, etc., we're going to deal with labor. They were that party at some point. But in the same way, those things just became talking points for Republicans. It became talking points for Democrats. So again, they would take cash and they would do right-wing stuff that would have FDR rolling in his grave, even though they would continue to talk like that same FDR who's spinning in his grave. Same thing is true with Republicans. Same thing is true with Democrats. You have a two-party system. These people have figured out ways to game the system in order to take huge amounts of cash and then do the bidding of the people who are giving them the cash. While at the same token, using terms like we're going to save jobs, we're going to give jobs, we're going to get jobs, we're going to get jobs, threatening your welfare. And what I mean by welfare, I mean the emphasis on jobs is going towards this idea of scarcity. Hey, do you want to be without? Do you want to be without? Vote for me. Do you want to be without? Vote for me. There are accoutrements on the side, but ultimately the main thread of that is vote for me. I'm going to bring back jobs. Now, both parties say it. Neither party really means it because both of those things are, the parties don't necessarily do anything to actually deal with the jobs issue. The jobs issue is somewhat intractable based upon the politics of our current day. You are going to have jobs shipped overseas because, for the most part, it's cheaper for those companies to do that. Once it gets cheaper for those companies to automate, they're going to automate. It has nothing to do with the person. It has nothing to do with a societal good or anything else. It has to do with maximizing their profits. That's just natural flow of the way things are in our economy. So yes, you're going to bleed American workers as a natural flow of the process. For example, taxi cabs. Google and Uber are in court fighting over automated car technology. Once you get to the point within 10 years that those cars are automated, all of those taxi drivers are going to be fired. All those Uber drivers are going to be fired. You're going to get to the point where you have stores. Technology is out now where you can walk into the store and it would automatically charge your credit card. But when you walk out, you don't need a cashier. You probably can cut that workforce that's at that store in half, maybe more than a half. I'm just making the point that your workforce is being bled off through no fault of the workforce itself, just as a natural ebb and flow of technology. Neither party is going to touch it. The right wing is damn sure not going to touch it. And you have no Democrat that's really talking about it. Your parties have sold you out. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If there is nothing else that we can agree on, we should be able to agree on this idea of pointing out corruption, to looking at these guys and understanding that the problem is both, not one or the other. The problem is both. You have a systemic problem of corruption throughout your entire system. And as long as that systemic problem of corruption is in that particular system, and as long as people, for the most part, don't pay attention to the people in offices, and honestly, if we're being honest, as long as you're within a capitalistic structure itself, you're never going to have an honest politics. The moment that money isn't part of that politics, the people with the means are going to buy off those politicians. Because of course they're going to buy them off. They need to protect themselves. It's only 1% of them. It's 99% of everyone else. If those politicians are doing the bidding of the people with the 99%, then those 1% is going to be disadvantaged. It makes good business sense to buy off the people who are in authority to make sure that things stay a particular way. The question becomes, do you understand that they are selling you a bill of goods? It's not one, it's not the other, it is both. Do you understand the system for the most part is being gamed based on these kind of ideological lines or identity lines and everything else? The issue that both of these parties obfuscate from is issues of class, not issues of race or anything else. The divisions that are in your society for the most part are less relevant than class. From a class standpoint, 99% of the people are the same. If nothing else, on issues of economics, you should be voting your self-interest. And I would make the case to you that even though these parties seem like an extreme from a psychological standpoint, just because there's only two, you have two options to choose from, so you just assume that these two things are extremes of one another. They're not. They game the system. Your problem is both. It's not one or the other. That's the point I want to get at. That's the point I want to make. So I'm going to keep this one short so it doesn't go too far with me just kind of beating a point over the head over and over and over and over again. Yeah, I leave it. I'll leave it. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, guys.